Now, after about 2 months of waiting, the federal government has finally released the sum of 5 billion naira for the aviation industry. 4 billion naira is sent to airlines, while 1 billion naira was also given to other allied service providers like ground handling firms, caterers, and other small businesses in the aviation value chain. The federal government had announced a bailout to cushion the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on operators as the businesses were shut down for months due to the outbreak of the pandemic. While scheduled carriers got 75% of the fund, non-scheduled carriers like charter and cargo operators also received 25% of the money. Similarly, state-backed airlines were reportedly excluded from the bailouts, thereby causing some bad blood within the system. There are also 9 scheduled carriers and 24 non-scheduled carriers, and they include Air Peace, Asman, Max Air, Dana Air, Air Contractor, Arik Air, as well as Medview, Ibom Air, and Overland. It is not clear how much each of the airlines got, but there are reports that each airline benefited based on the number of employees on its payroll. Well, it's now time to go into details with this development, and I have with me to discuss this and much more Tayo Ujuri, the managing partner of Aglo Aviation Services Limited. Good to have you on the breakfast show today, and a Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you as well.
Better late than never is the sentiment that we have welcoming this 5 billion naira bailout fund, but the question that remains on the minds of so many Nigerians is that this bailout intervention fund we are having now was meant for the initial first wave. We have a much bigger hit at this point in time for the second wave. How do you receive this news, first and foremost, of the release before you go in depth?
It's good news. It's a first step in the right direction. But the analogy I like to give it, we were in a deep hole in aviation prior to COVID-19. Lots of challenges, financial, operational challenges, which was now being exacerbated by COVID-19. Like you rightly said, the first wave really did have a huge impact with the closure from April till September. So now with second wave, that is actually having a higher impact, negative impact. The 5 billion it's just a drop in the ocean. In what we're seeing after COVID with the startup is that there's a lot of cash burnout for the airlines. For every operation that the airline does, on each passenger you're losing $72. So we're envisaging with the second wave, which is still open-ended and up in the air at this point, we're looking at a 200 million cash burnout and debt within 2021.
Would it come to you as a surprise that possibly the federal government might not be thinking of another set of intervention funds for key sectors like the aviation sector as we are going into dealing with the second wave of the COVID-19? Because this delay does not necessarily show or express the body language of understanding clearly the impact on the sector.
Aviation is a catalyst for the economy, but the challenge, that's the reality. But the challenge and the other reality of the second leg is the fact that government does not have that resources. And what we've seen, if we have to compare apples and apples globally and within the aviation sector, we've seen where governments have actually guaranteed sovereign loans or guaranteed loans from Exim banks and like African development banks to help these airlines. That would go a long way to grow the airline rather than just these handouts.
And in terms of contractual agreements that we also expect to see, take for example, European airlines predict that we would have about $11.9 billion loss this year. Working with big data is also important here in Africa, in Nigeria to be specific, but we don't necessarily have the translation of the figures. Earlier on during the first wave, we pegged the sum relatively well over 20 billion naira as to that point in time. But with the absence of data, we cannot then properly plan or ask for intervention funds, don't you think?
I do, but not that. What we see, yes, there is lack of data. However, there's still data we can work around with. There's data from the airlines, which we can, there's data from the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority, and as well as the Airspace Management Authority.
I ask this because if we had data to work with, then we could present to the government the enormity of the debt that airlines are suffering just as a result of the COVID-19. So the body language is that government is trying its best, but sometimes your best is not good enough when you look at the gravity you have to deal with.
There are two different things here you're talking about. About the data, there's available data. There's how much impact which aviation is contributing to the economy. Prior to this time, we knew it was 0.04%.
No, but the debt's now.
The debt now, that's even available at about 17 billion per month. So at burning 17 billion per month, prior to COVID, during the COVID, the first wave, that's going to actually go higher now with the second wave, which will be more of about over, say, 20 billion naira per month. For the major airlines. We have about 3-4 major airlines and burning about 20 billion per month. Within 6 months, the cash crunch is going to go higher and they're going to be in debt. So it's not a matter of government not knowing the availability of the funds to actually source the solution or assistance to these airlines to actually survive second wave.
As the lack of funds.
Sorry, just let me land this. The challenge with the other part is when there's no support or there's no financial support, is that from government or from the banks or the financial agencies, they're going to collapse.
But you understand that globally we are also experiencing a meltdown. Other countries regionally and continentally are also experiencing their own deep issues that they have to battle with in terms of finances. But you still see continuous efforts towards interventions, support. There is this higher level of injection across key sectors.
Yes.
And without a doubt, aviation also is one of those highly considered as the most needed in terms of that support. Do you think we can, at any point in time, replicate this model in Nigeria?
It has to be replicated. Just last week, we had British Airways actually now, which is part of the IAG group, actually get a £2 billion injection, not from the government, but from a financial agency, but it's government backed. We have Air France KLM that within this week they started talks about restructuring to increase the share capital to be able to withstand COVID-19, post-COVID-19 era. What we're seeing, which is what is key at this point, COVID-19 is still, second wave is still up in the air. Still, we don't actually know where this is going to end, which is a huge issue. Nobody can forecast and say this is what's going to happen in the next 3 to 6 months. With that, because we don't have vaccines are still not confirmed, we still have issues with lots of multi-layered approaches. Each airline, each country have their own policies on how to come into their country, how the flight operations are going to be operated, which is not consonant with IATA's protocols or ICAO's protocols. So that's going to actually affect airline operations. So with all that as the background, that's going to affect cash burn and operational cost of operating airlines. So in the next 3-4 months, we're going to see lots of cash burn out, and with the cash burn out, what needs to be done is that structured financial injection, not necessarily from government, which is what your emphasis is on. It can be structured from
other leasers.
Yes, other leasers.
But I would now like to put you in a yes or no answer at this point in time.
I get this all the time.
Just to remind you about the question I asked earlier on in our previous conversation now, based on IATA's reports now, Europe had a record of about 70% drop in terms of passenger numbers. Africa and the Middle East had the largest hit, 72 to 73% now. Once again, do you think, going by the current indices we have in the economy and then the aviation sector and the treatment we've gotten so far, do you think we'll see airlines die a natural death or merge?
Die a natural death.
Thank you very much for your time on the Breakfast Show today.
My pleasure.